Hello everyone, it's that time of the year again, therefore I wish you heartily, as always. I make you the best wishes for the new year, and may this time bring to you all the best, all the most positive realizations, the proximity of those you love, um, near and far as they can be, but spiritually so. And may this time of peace, which may be within us only if we want it to be so. We're talking in a time which definitely there is no peace, right? And arguably, this has never existed by a degree or another, right? But what we can achieve in this regard may make us aware of how lucky we are to enjoy such moments of serenity, right? And these can really be just being with your family, even in the most difficult strains, in the most difficult times. There is no doubt a special place in our heart for the children, women, and men of Ukraine that this year have given the world much more than anybody could have ever thought was possible in historical moments like this, right? And I think they would teach us better, right? How lucky it means just to live in what we call peace, right? Aside from any other wish, right? Of say of wealth, hopefully health. That is something that often goes in parallel with a true serenity. And I can tell you that I've been lucky in my life, but in the last years there's been a series of incredible calamities, mostly due to, unfortunately, not just even to times and ages, let's say, when you may be ill, or statistically so, but my family, relatives, so on. So it's not been a very luminous time. This year, in fact, as we were saying, was shadowed by the broader issues. Also, the previous ones weren't that great. Last year, in particular, as you know, for those who followed me at the time, I felt pretty strained for reasons that, in that regard, make me think of the necessity of striving for reaching interior peace more than else. Because most of what we complain about, or arguably anything, can be overcome, and this is in fact the meaning of of our holidays, of my holidays specifically. And of course, here I insert pictures that I hope are pleasant to you all, because I think they have a universal meaning, right? And this is, as we know from our religious insight, in the historical content, and so on, the true message at the end of the day, that there is truly a transfigurational potential and a true salvation for all, right? And the way this is achieved, of course, is a bit the great mystery that we strive to solve throughout our own existence, that, however, is truly nothing short of a miracle per se. So, in our culture, we have come, of course, every year to carve a time to reflect, to live in ways that can make us closer to that kind of meditation and realization, hopeful, in a hopeful externation from the more trivial aspects of existence that are important as well, because everything is in essence as much as it is in detail, right? And trying to distinguish it there is not really useful, as I think our general historical interest shows us. And thus, I like to think that all of you, from wherever you follow me, which I confess every once in a while I check, because, as you know, I don't make favors to anyone, as far as I'm concerned. Just I try to be stern but fair at the same time. So um, I present a face that is the one that you not literally see, it's just my human face um, in on the channel. But there is, of course, a sensitive part of me. I follow your comment as much as you follow me. I check, right, the stats, the demographics. I'm interested in where you come from. I'm interested what your ideas are, because at the end of the day, this channel is made by us, right? I can, of course, come here and make the thing, but without your support, arguably, not even what I make would be impactful, because the way it spreads and it has some effect, sort. If you watch and click and so on, it is relevant in this community perspective. I hope, in this sense, to be blessed just in this season by serenity as much as I could. I found it after this year, and I must say that exactly, in fact, 1 year ago, I was going through the worst of that kind of psychomachia, we can call it like this, and it was exactly the events of February that shook me in a way that made me realize how it's really about ourselves, right? That most of the problems that we complain about are really nothing compared to the great tragedies and to the ultimate trials, hardships that, in a way or another, we will have all to cope with. We already have, right, in our life, and more or less fortunate as this may be, right? We know what at the end this is about, and not, let's say, in fact, distracting oneself with something relative, something limited, with something, in fact, that we attribute, because we're responsible of it, a sort of intrinsic value just out of nothing, right? Is really dangerous, and it's a way just to make us turn our head and stop acting and thinking what would be much better for us. As for me, I cannot complain, in fact, on my life. I could, if not about myself, what I could do more. There is always a sense of duty that should derive from such reflection time, and we all start eventually with the good proposals, but then we tire down, and so at some point during the day or during the year we say, well, okay, well, I will just laze off now, even though I probably will do it in excess, and I could do better, and I could relax myself sometimes. We're also wired, or kind of addicted, dependent on something at some point, and we don't realize how simple, after all, not necessarily easy, and that's exactly the thing, but how simple it would be to have a healthier life, psychophysically. And the force that stems from this realization should always guide us to a better self as we can, because our potential is truly divine. This is what these holidays have within themselves as a realization, as I mean, that we have, after all, what we need always under our very eyes, right? Also, just metaphorically meant, just in front of us, and we just turn our head. We actually know, but we don't act, and that's a form, naturally, of weakness that is truly stemming from our choice, not much because doing the thing is difficult, because we have always the strengths. We can always find, I mean, even in the moments where everything seems the hardest, we can realize that pressure mostly comes from within from something that is not working properly, and that we may not have the determination to fix. Courage or knowledge alone do not fix problems. It's the correct understanding and the will of fixing it that really makes it. It's really easy. It's really part also the first steps of initiatory wisdoms that stress, in fact, the heaviness of our material dimension. Of course, we are bound to it because spirit and flesh are. The limit is still within the will of the person. We don't know, at least we would know, not by direct experience, but by, if you want, also absolute intuition, what would happen at that point. And that's why it's worth trying, right? And this is also the meaning of this whole. I am working mostly at my articles for journals, conferences, and I'm in the productive phase of it. The channel is going, right? I discovered that you like some topics rather than others, and I could push a bit more on those if you are interested specifically. As a Christmas wish, you could ask, say, what kind of content you would like to see more, right, than others. You have flocked in the last year. The channel has come back, let's say, on its feet after the fixing of the previous one. And thus I see that there are new faces, new voices, and I'm interested in what you're mostly interested in, because you may just say, let's see what he uploads this time. But it's obvious that some suggestions in particular are let's say much more viable than others. First of all, that's what I'm actually saying is that, of course, I will take note of different ideas that are always in my mind. As long as I work, I am seemingly blessed with a decent memory regarding to this thing. And I already made videos on request, of course. Some of them are also some of the most successful, that became algorithmic and that attract most of the views. And as you know, sometimes I think that the reasons may not be there may be better ones in that regard, and at least if such topics make views, some others could make even more. Naturally, as I was saying before, it's also a matter of personal limits. First of all, the more you are, the more complicated it becomes to address evenly all the requests, all the comments. So sometimes, especially in the video, let's say in the political content that I make, it happens to be quite vehement, and you may not understand who or what I'm addressing. So I think that dedicating attention to the single questions is important. At the same time, there is a general answer, I think, in the videos themselves, and I can be quite tranchant about them sometimes because of the benefit of the audience, because the questions may be actually very demanding, maybe even unconsciously so, because they always ask, of course, something, but the implications sometimes of the questions is maybe not reached by the question itself. So in order to answer properly, sometimes I have to really go beyond the obstacle and make a much greater say background space to eventually address the single topic. and otherwise it wouldn't be understood, right? So I am always influenced by these kind of considerations whenever I make a specific video. Thus, at the end of the day, it may take time. But generally speaking, addressing, as I was saying before, not maybe a specific question, but a certain direction, a certain kind of video, certain, let's say, broader subject, may be an idea, right? I'm surely not running out of topics. As a matter of fact, the opposite is true, that I have so much available right now that I can really address an enormous range of subjects, and this is also what produces the demand, because you realize evidently that I can come up with different things if I want, or just from a day to another. And of course, making videos has helped me because, aside from my speaking limits, say as far as research and putting together different material and making certain criticism depending a certain issue, like it's become very easy for me. I could always make hours long videos, and the only reason why I don't do that is that, first of all, I run out of voice, and after a couple of hours I start like talking like this, and I don't like that very much, because obviously that's mostly when I take a longer step than my leg, let's say, because again, there are topics that deserve that, right? Some of you point this out, that aside from the format of the content, it's still pretty primitive, I would say, if not brutal, or the way I deliver, kind of, if anything, a more complex point. It's not even that I'm particularly knowledgeable per se. I think, of course, I try to specialize and to accumulate in knowledge and arranging it in ways that just our mind, that is as a true divine gift, can make us do this synthesis that are amazing. Just by exercise, you realize that these functions develop. But it's that's where I feel also my physical limits sometimes, also especially the ones of time, if anything, because I must say that the channel doesn't take me more time than it's necessary. But let's say the fact that I upload daily, and that I still have in theory some video to re-upload from the older ones with better images and so on, but I try, of course, I give the precedence to the new ones, because I think they're more to the point. But I did re-upload some older videos, also frankly poor quality ones that you somehow enjoyed dramatically, which is quite interesting. But in general, the impression is, again, that you can personally contribute to this much more than you think, or at least I don't speak very much of that. You see that I remain in charge, and that I fundamentally take the lead on everything, because I'm just my own way maker, just by character, and I don't really follow others in that sense. But suggestions in the gnoseological space, and also because I start knowing you individually in some way, or at least some of you are just names or avatars, but I realize essentially some characteristics behind them, and I can see where the person is going, right? That there is a common, let's say, there is a connection truly with what I also confess I began to take quite a liking in doing. That is to say, on the base of every statement, trying to understand the person's opinion regarding many more things than even just a line of words may explicitate, right? And so I always care about what you tell me. So of course, if you stick around and you follow my somehow roller coasting trail of thought, you can also get more or less what space, what room there is for specific, say, focus on a given topic, an expansion of the same, or talking about something similar. As far as the content is concerned, I did change some series during or better, I added some mostly in the last year, so that the cycle that I use to draw the topics from has widened, but it's remained fundamentally the same. If anything, from the last year I began the series about the historical regions, which I think is somehow successful because it does get more views than the average. But sometimes I also realize that either I made too few of them so that they don't intertwine so much, or maybe they're too generic, like talking about, say, even one century of a specific country, politics, history. At some point, like, either it's already known, like the recent, I don't know, medieval England topics, for which, for example, I don't know, the Anglo-Normans were definitely more successful than the Angevins for some reason. But at the same time, there is, in fact, really more than I can do, and especially the recent mini-series that I made about the Roman army had a clamorous success. And you know that as a medievalist, most of my content has another timeline, but if you're particularly interested in that and you're somehow curious and you think that there some kind of broader take, because I made many videos actually about Roman history, but they are somehow very in detail usually. So I understand why someone may be relatively interested as opposed to something much more encompassing. It's also true that they're more general videos. Of course, I never have kind of a dumb crisis, like a blank paper crisis when I talk about Rome. But let's say the essence of probably the reason why you're there is the same that can be found also in the other videos. This is an aspect that I think is, of course, normal as far as YouTube presents the thumbnail, the just a face of what you think the video could be about, and so you decide whether to look at that or not. So something more scenographic may, attract more in a sense. And if it's more general, say, well, let's see maybe the sap, in fact, the take, the broader take on this subject, without getting all the hundreds of videos that he made on the general topic. Well, yeah, it's a way just to attract more and to let's say, just to even enter indeed some greater questions that sometimes are skipped by the more in-depth videos. And so I care particularly also about the general appreciation, because I say the more general the video is, and the more problems I have with it, telling the truth, because it always feels like I'm skipping something important, crucial. I'm making it too simple, too superficial. And that's why I also at that point talk for 2 hours and a half, because it can't really be the right chance to say all the things that make that wall. So I think this is a bit different from the YouTube's average that seems to me in the last couple of years has somehow shifted brutally towards kind of a irregimented pattern, right? The bigger channels are the ones that make the lion's share in absolute terms. The smaller ones are always more secondary in that regard, and so many also probably will give up at some point, and so those who will remain will probably also appear strange compared to the usual graphic quality and so on. I can't even say that, let's say, there are bad videos around. It seems to me, of course, most of them are clickbaits, and they make you stay that first minute just glued because of an animation, and they don't really tell you anything. It may be said afterwards, so it's still a way to cash in a way. That for me, the income is relative. Of course, I think that as long as the channel grows, it could be a help, right? I am perfectly fine with earning, but it's not a priority. Let's say, at least I do this for pure interest, I would say. First of all, I'm very curious about it. I'm very curious about the challenges that the same subject choice and delivery entail, and I learned a lot of things through Schwerpunkt myself. So I think that it's really it has a huge potential, right? The point is, of course, where do we want to make it go? Because, for example, the number of subscribers increase, but the number of views, say, doesn't match that. That's always been the case. They are normally not directly proportional indicators. At the same time, I do understand there is an algorithm out there, and that, in fact, the bigger videos are more watched. And I don't even know I don't know how it is from you, because I realized that I somehow managed to fidelize a core of viewers, of hundreds of viewers at this point, or regular ones. But most views actually come from people who do not even have an account, so that do not subscribe. They're not counted, if not as views. But it seems to me that YouTube has gotten a bit toxic, a little bit. At least the type of videos. Sometimes I talk about it in those rambles, especially from the History playlist, in which I start even criticizing the thumbnails and the psychology behind it. That's actually a much more important topic and I would like to make some videos specifically dedicated to that, because it's as if everything had been chipped down. Like, I remember not even when I started, say 10 years ago, rather than when I started Schwerpunkt, but say YouTube was a place once upon a time where there were people that spoke their mind. Now it's not even become entertainment, which had always existed as well, anymore. It's as if creators bent on the deepest obsessions of the audience and tried just to cash through that, right? And that's why they probably put also much greater effort than I can do individually, because I do this all alone. So as you know, I don't even engage in interviews, in debates, whatever. Some of you say there's always been a part of the audience who has asked me, why don't you do that, right? Why don't you speak also on another channel, participate to debate? It's a hard question to answer in a way, because I could simply say that I don't think other users are on my same wavelength, right? Especially when it gets down to history and historians. We tend to have our own, at least the subject allows us to create our own niche. You understand that my content is very peculiar, right? In terms of, not much of subjects in general, but the way I explain them, in the general cut it has, I see even as a field of study has not been developed quite much, right? Normally people who study military history do not study religious history in the same way, do not take some specific interpretational paths. They're more satisfied also with general skepticism. I inverted direction. Also, I cover basically any era, so it's obvious that I know the Middle Ages better, but at the same time I spent a lot of time before also Schwerpunkt studying other things. And so it's obvious that exposing myself to the average that exists out there, I'm not even saying that the average is better or worse than me. I don't mind. There are good minds out there. But since we are in an era of ideologism rather than ideology per se, I think that sometimes it's useless, right? If you want just to show off, or I'm immediately competitive, aggressive, and somehow I treat what I do more instinctively seriously than what I see being done usually. Also the formats, the type of criticism, and so on. So I think that speaking like this, and of course there can be. Once I did make a video, interview the Reese. I don't remember I think it's I don't want to get the name of the channel wrong, but if you search on YouTube, like there is something like interview or talk with Schwerpunkt, and once I did it, we talked about, it was mostly Viking history. But it was rare because, first of all, at the time I would be also different from now, but at the same time it was it felt, aside from the guy who was totally friendly and a person that was also making good work on his own and had interesting insight. It wouldn't be a place where I would be fully myself, because when I speak with other people, of course, I try always to get the point of what the other person is saying. I'm not just expressing all what I have in my mind at every time. And that's why I have this kind of format for the videos, because they are mostly podcasts and they explore certain topics that the premises of which are also to be found in other videos I made. So it's not really easy to bring it to the table. And it's obvious that by remaining on my own, I could even sometimes end up in a rabbit hole, because some ideas I have are really controversial, as you know, but not because they're particularly, contrarian or extremistic. It's just that I think they are the obvious, objective assessment that you can make historically. That's something I've always been somehow interested in. Like, I'd never seen history like a sort of modular type of learning where you have be strictly formal and just pretend to be perfect about that dish. It has to be literally breaking through the meaning, to read through, to get down to the essence of the message, and not all what is built around it. That's why I'm also dissatisfied in general with the academy, because it doesn't seem there to any space, any room for this consideration really exists. That's why I also make YouTube videos. People often ask me, do you have Spotify, whatever. I think this format is better. Also, since there is pictures that may not be so, I don't know. Some of them are quite good. At least it's the selection, the topic choice, the picture choice that really makes the atmosphere of it all. And I take great care in that, telling the truth. Most of the time it takes me to make the video has to do with finding the right pictures, right? Which I'm also systematically storing by topic, so I save a lot of time now compared to last year when I began to do this with the Creative Commons content. So I think there is a space for this channel to grow, and I think it's a Schwerpunkt fully come back, like after a year and a half from the break, from at least the contraction, right, the shrinking, the resizing. It's obvious that the content is marketable, right? People are going to watch it, but what I've always noticed is that the engagement rate is quite high. What doesn't seem to be high is the I'm talking about YouTube average comparative. So the point seems there that it's difficult to make people know that Schwerpunkt even exists or what it is about. And I give you that it's never been easy, because again I had millions of impressions, but again getting a person into the mindset that these videos requires is not easy at all. If anything, just to follow them, right? And know whether also lifestyle is changing. It's obvious that if a type of average TikTok content will dominate, in some years it will be ever more difficult to speak like this. But even there, like, YouTube is so big, and even though lots of other videos are uploaded from the same topic and so on, I think that aside from the perseverance and the, let's say, the sheer number of videos, the core message has an enormous potential, and history makes it. I just am a medium of divinity in that sense. I don't do but what just unveils itself in front of my eyes. So I just have to tell that, right, and how it happens. And that's what I think the interest in Schwerpunkt has always been. And it's obvious that in a season like this, people are stay more at home. They are lazier. Maybe they want to listen to this daily voice speaking while they're doing something else and learning about this and that. And of course, my my person is present there because, again, I'm the only one making it, and I'm aware of the, let's say, the responsibility first of all, but in delivering the right message, not being misunderstood, which is much more difficult than you imagine. Even though I think my speech, again, linguistic limits aside, is quite clear. If you listen to it in say till the end, you realize every video has a broader point that connects it, right? Even in 2 hours from the beginning to the final, there's always a broader point. I also have other videos that are connected to it, so I never leave you alone in that, and I think it's important for the audience. And I could always explain myself better. That's also true. But the more I do this, the better. I'm going to, of course, to become, because before it was much more difficult, of course, and I improved somehow. So it's a mix of topic choice, of commitment, of luck too. We are 6,700 at this point. And it's an important number. It's still kind of a small channel, of course, but the core, as you see, can make easily thousands of views in a day if it gets it clicks right, let's say. And matching this wavelength is the challenge from the both of us, right? And so I hope naturally the channel will have a future in that regard, and even in, say, to a scale that is more important than just a YouTube channel. We could expand in other fields in a way, because you know that at the end of the day there is essentially an imperial interest and a universal project behind this, and I'm not kidding about it. I think especially in a European perspective, I am designing a specific amount of a specific type of content, also amount, because this is meant to be used at some point. I did find people who I discovered that they use my content in schools. Well, I hope they don't get in front of the kids to the passages in which I start escalating on the imperial domination and the concepts of legitimacy in rule. And so, because at least some of them would not receive it well, but I confess at the same time that's exactly the message that I want to spread, right? Hopefully to adults per se, cultivating this um, this specific fact setting that is required just as a background for grafting the further points that I'm going to make. And in fact, I also think I will add some other type of content that will actually push in the say, I can't say too much, but in the in a supernatural direction. I don't literally mean just religiously per se or something, but there are some traditions that have been somehow forgotten, and it's important to unveil the practice, like the initiatory traditional wisdom that has been cancelled. There are very specific steps, right? I can say it's just like masonry or something, but it could be the base of that kind of personal development path that was used in the past that we have somehow erased, and it was very specific, and that would reveal many things that, again, symbols that you've seen all the time, but you've never even suspected what it actually meant. That I find very fascinating. Then of course the military historical one is the military historical content is very present, and it will remain that. Of course, I mostly talk about medieval warfare, but at the same time there are different eras, and especially a political background must be fixed. I thought I said it to start discussing a bit of contemporary political ideologies, because it seems to me that the historical compass there is being completely lost. Like kids nowadays believe everything. You tell them about the something and it's opposite about any political ideology, they don't understand it anymore. And at least, I don't know, when I went to school it was kind of normal to learn it well, and the average, maybe, of course, already at the time was lost, but it needs to be. We need to have some very firm, specific points on which to anchor, because sometimes I do get questions that also seem to be the consequence of that, like not realizing that, for example, an ideology can coexist with another, and what are the most direct implications of this lack of awareness. I think it's particularly crucial for especially young audience to concretely know that, but also just evenemental history. In fact, the historical region series was directed chiefly at that, because I realized at some point it was just making sort of thematic videos in which I talked often about, I don't know, a specific political culture or institution or army, etc., but I never told the history of the specific policy that expressed that. And that's also, unfortunately, how most history is told nowadays. You just habituate to have a theoretical approach, but that is ever more disconnected from just the basics of what even happened, right? And the obvious consequence is that you can't start making moral relativism on the base of that lack of knowledge. Like, if a concept is something that doesn't sound right to you because you don't know literally from where and how it emerged, and an entire cultural wave tells you to think otherwise, and you, again, if you literally don't know what happened, you don't have terms of comparison, so you can't start bending the ideologies and using them for describing a reality that never existed. This is unfortunately the direction that we're taking nowadays, and that's why I'm also so concerned with it, and why it all seems so much riskier than it is. It's true also that my content is multi-layered. Like, even from the pictures or the um, or the or the topics or whatever. It's it's hard to focus on multiple things at a time. I do get views from different types of viewers that does sometimes don't see the broader point that I've made. So it's obvious that that it depends mostly on me to deliver a knowledge that is as comprehensive as possible, so that there is no missing point. And that's also why when I can't fully do that, because I don't want to repeat myself too much, even though I do, just for the type of content that is comparative and in a sense aims to a unitary interpretation. So that is necessary, but I often say, look, I have made this video and I have this playlist already, you can check those. That's really important. That's, in my opinion, of course boring, but still well spent time, because it makes you aware that there is probably, depending on when you started watching, from like a lot of stuff that of course you surely, that there is nobody who has checked all the content but me, of course, as I spoke it literally. So again, this particular aspect is, in my opinion, worth considering. And the more content I make, and the greater chances there is to reconnect this all, right? I don't know whether the algorithm is awakening. Surely things have been improving as far, especially as the research videos. We're not at the same times as before, but let's say from the navigational functions, as YouTube calls them, probably just notifications the subscribers get, and the YouTube search, we did get to actually similar pre-crisis moments, right? Again, the crisis was caused by me. There is no doubt, you know what happened. But it was also a mild thing. I just took enormous precautions just to make this channel basically impossible to be eliminated. And because that's more when you upload 1600 videos, that's something I saved them all, by the way, so there is no chance, unless something happens to me, that the thing goes lost per se. But in terms of watch length, we surpassed just this week the even the highest one we had last year since ever. Views are still lower though, and this has to do with, generally speaking, again, the depth of the fishing of, again, either from the search or the algorithm, however it works, which is probably also well balanced, right? So it's important as always to share a lot. That's the only Christmas wish that I have, and that's always been the crucial thing. Again, that's not the only thing, indeed. But again, the distinct impression has been this one, that as far as the channel is watched, it overperforms for YouTube standards. The point is that seemingly doesn't circulate for some reason. So I will keep improving again, but it's also important to share a lot, which I try to do, but I rarely have. At some point I actually start lacking the time, because I do other stuff now that requires a lot of attention, and I can't share like I used to do, like on Facebook groups, aside from the fact that normally that's kind of a unpleasant thing to do in the first place. I don't like to propagandize my own content in that way, but lots of you presumably also came from there back in the day, and that's basically it. So I spend time talking about this because, as you know, I don't have stopped making channel updates since last year, and that was an convenience every 100th video in which I literally talk just about how the channel was faring, the stats and so on. So I somehow take a chance to say something here and there to just inform you about the whole thing. But let's go on. Let's see what happens. I have good hopes, for, as I always had. But of course, there's also a time problem. So I'm going to upload always. I'm not going to slow down or whatever. It's just, of course, this thing could be much speedier, and I have to find the right way to improve, to present the topics, kind of defeating this weird algorithm, and just taking this hopefully to a next level. For the rest, yeah, I wanted to make this relaxing video without focusing too much on, say, the things that after all we always discuss in our videos. So it's just Christmas time, and it feels like it's right to again slow down in that moment and reflecting a little bit on the broader value of things, because even complaining doesn't quite get you anywhere just per se. In this, I cannot avoid to thank you for the enormous support that you give me with the watch length, with the views, with the likes, with everything that contributes dramatically to Schwerpunkt, and I have no words, because it seems to me like sometimes the subscribers appear like this boring number on the indicator, and I can't see you, right? So I obviously lack the concrete dimension of the fact that 6,700 people decided to subscribe and even more watch me from the outside. But I'm well aware of the fact that you are other fellow humans interacting with my content and speaking their mind and appreciating or not appreciating and giving life to this. So there is truly a spiritual communion here, and it does embody much of the things that we have been observing in other ways on Schwerpunkt. It does fuel itself a little bit. That's a bit the point of the channel, and I think it has a lot of potential thanks to you, right? So this I really treasure as the best gift that you could make, not to me, but to the point of this, right? Which is more important, of course. And again, don't worry about me. I will stick to this, and there is something which makes it really worth it, and that is you. Because if I didn't have faith in our potential, I think that potential would remain unexploited, right? It would just pass at some point. Instead, we have this chance and we're making it, and we are growing in multiple ways, let's say, in the process. Thus, I will silence myself. Tomorrow I will not upload, of course, but I'm always here. I wish anyone, really, because this is my point, a happy Christmas and happy New Year, that I will, of course, make to you when it comes. Happy Epiphany, for that matter, too. And this in advance also for our Orthodox sisters and brothers that celebrate later, and for anyone really that from any other religion, creed, to all my atheistic followers or my agnostic followers, and it's really difficult to objectivize where we really stand in practice, because as we've seen, it's often much of our positions are often illusory in the broader scale of the thing. But of course, that's what we are trying to recover, and so these wishes really come from the heart, as I think they have a universal value, right? So I even if it's not holiday times in your community, whatever, if you don't celebrate, I still wish you the best in this moment. And may it be just, again, as always, as any given time, a chance of reflection, of serenity, and of love, which is really, I think, the most important thing in life as it's in its greatest expression, and that we celebrate, right? And I think this has a much greater meaning that can be expressed. I would like to conclude with perhaps more poignant words, but I truly wish you happy holidays. Have the best time, and see you next time.